Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about early season hunting strategy and more specifically, early October hunting strategy. I know there's a lot of states out there where the hunting season starts in early September or mid-September, but here in Michigan, our season starts on October 1st, so we're going to be focusing more on early October hunting strategies. Now, to make sure that this video doesn't go too long, we are not going to be able to cover everything that there is about early season or early October hunting strategies for whitetails. But just like with a lot of our videos, we are going to be covering a few different things. First, we'll talk about a few of the things that you should be keying in on as a part of your early season strategy. Next, we'll kind of talk about when you should actually be going in to hunt and what are some of the factors that you should be keeping an eye on. And finally, just like we do in every one of our videos, I want to try to give you our approach to it, kind of what we do. It is more of a conservative approach, and I know that's not for everyone. That's why I kind of want to start with focusing on some of these other strategies before we move into what we like to do. So the first thing that you guys need to be doing is scouting. Scout, scout, scout. Put in some boot time on the property that you're going to be hunting. And if you're able to do it, a lot of this scouting should be taking place immediately following the previous hunting season. Where are those deer and those bucks going to be bedded on the property in early October? We won't really get into it much in this video, but where these deer are bedding in the summer is much different than where they're bedding in the fall. In late September, early October, those bucks are going to start moving into that secure, high stem count bedding cover. So again, if you're able to scout that property in late December, early January, a lot of times those deer and those bucks are going to be using the same bedding locations that they were during early October. So having a general idea on where these deer are bedding is huge, because now you have a starting point. And the next thing you need to do is find a food source. And there are a few food sources in early October that I put a premium on, and that's oaks and apple trees. I don't think it's any secret that whitetails love apples and whitetails love acorns. So again, if you're able to scout in the late summer, bring some binoculars with you, find those white oaks, find those red oaks, look up into that canopy and find those oaks that are producing an abundant supply of acorns. Now, if I had a preference on what oak to focus on, I would prefer white oak over red oak. But if you only have red oak, don't worry about it. Focus on the red oak. And one of the reasons that they think whitetails prefer white oak acorns over red oak acorns and other varieties is because of the low levels of tannic acid in the white oak acorns compared to the red oak in the other varieties. Again, if you only have red oak, don't worry about it. There's still a lower level of tannic acid, and whitetails love red oak acorns. A lot of times in early October, when we have a few oak trees in the back that are having a bumper crop year of acorns, the deer do not frequent our food plots nearly as often. They're back in the timber feeding on those acorns. The second natural food source I'd be looking for on the property would be apple trees. Again, this is something that you're going to want to be scouting in the summer because not every year is the same. You could have had a late frost that just stopped the production of that tree for the year. And if that's the case, that hunting location isn't going to be nearly as good as if that tree was full of apples. So again, scouting is key. You want to make sure you're finding those bedding locations, and you also are finding those early season food sources. So once you've found the bedding locations and once you've found that fall food, now you need to figure out where you're going to hang your stand. And if you're able to do it, you need to find natural pinch points. Essentially what that means is, instead of having like a big open woodlot where the deer can be moving anywhere, the movement is more isolated and condensed into a smaller area. Some of the locations that you're going to see this more frequently are if you have two ponds and then a land bridge right in the middle. Those deer are not going to walk right in the middle of that pond. They're going to skirt the edge of it. So you have very predictable deer movement right in that pinch point. The same goes for open fields. Let's say there's a woodlot down south, a woodlot up north, and you have open fields, but there's a narrow section of cover connecting the two. This could even be a hedgerow that a farmer's let grow up over time. The deer are going to use that to get from one section of cover to the next section of cover. They do not want to walk across that open field. So they're either going to skirt the edge of that field just on the outside of it, or they're going to be just on the inside of it in the cover making their way through. So those are definitely some areas that I'd be keying in on to increase my chances of seeing deer. So the final step to all that is putting all the pieces together. You have a pretty good idea where those deer are bedding. You have a pretty good idea where those deer are going to be feeding one of those early season fall food sources. You have a natural or maybe a man-made pinch point somewhere in between, set up on the downwind side of that natural pinch point. Deer in the early season, early October, they're not really that pressured, so the movement should be fairly predictable. They're still in that bedding to feeding pattern. So if you're able to set up in a situation like this, the chances that you're going to see deer is pretty high. And the next thing I want to talk about is when you should actually be hunting. And the first thing I want to talk about is something that I've made a mistake on many times in my hunting career, and that's hunting the wrong time of day. So in the early season, you should be focusing more on the afternoon or night hunt compared to that early morning sit, especially if you're trying to target one of those older bucks in the area. And the reason that you don't really want to be focusing in on the morning hunt, because there's a pretty good chance that that deer is already back in his bed before you even get to your stand location, and well before legal shooting light. Now, typically in the morning, you do want to be focusing more on those bedding locations, and in the afternoon, you want to be focusing on that bedding to feeding movement. But in early October, if you're hunting too close to those known buck bedding locations, you just have a lot greater chance of educating that deer that he's being hunted as opposed to actually harvesting him. And I've made that mistake many times in the past. You have this deer on camera, he's moving through at this time, it's really close to shooting light, I'm gonna go in there early, I'm gonna catch him when he walks through. But in early October, you just have a much greater chance of spooking him, and unfortunately that's what I've done too many times in the past. Learn from our mistakes and try to resist the temptation to push too far into those known buck bedding locations in the early season. So if you're not hunting in the morning, then obviously you're gonna be hunting in the afternoon. You wanna be hunting that bedding to feeding movement, and this is because it's a fairly predictable movement and your chance of spooking deer is a lot less. So now that we kind of talked about trying not to hunt the mornings, hunt more in the afternoon if you can. Now, when should you actually be hunting? Now, for a lot of people, it kind of just boils down to you hunt when you can. If you work a 9 to 5, 5 days a week, your only chance to go hunting is, Friday through Sunday, and so that's when you're going to go. And if you fall into that category, it's definitely understandable to want to be able to get out as much as you can. But in the early season, a lot of times, depending on your job, if you're able to leave a little bit early, there are some times even during the week that you're able to slip out and hunt the afternoon. It doesn't really start getting dark until 7:30, 8 o'clock in early October. So again, depending on the flexibility with your job, if you're able to go in a little early, to leave a little early, and if this is you, there are a couple things with the weather that you want to be watching to determine whether or not you should be going out hunting. It's a pretty well-known fact that whitetails move a lot more after a significant temperature drop, or post-cold front. So after that front moves through, the temperature drops anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees, those deer are going to be moving a lot for the next 2 days. And you can throw a lot of other weather factors in there too, whether it's rain, whether it's snow, whether it's wind. When things start calming down, those deer start moving. So if you're watching the weather and you see that cold front sitting on Wednesday, and there's a big drop from Wednesday to Thursday, you definitely want to try to get in the woods Thursday afternoon. So just to kind of recap that one more time, if you're able to, try to focus more on that afternoon or night hunt, and especially try to be in the woods post-cold front after that significant temperature drop. And lastly here, I'll talk about our early season hunting approach. And again, I said it's pretty conservative and it's not for everyone, but I did want to share our early season strategy. And our approach is we really don't hunt our property a whole lot until about mid-October. So right around October 18, October 20, that is most likely when we're going to start going in and hunting more frequently. And the simple reason behind it is that those older bucks that we're targeting really don't move a whole heck of a lot until about the 20th of October on the properties that we hunt. There's a lot of surrounding hunting pressure, and even though our properties don't have a whole lot of hunting pressure on them, those deer still don't really leave their bedding areas until right at dark. And we could try to sneak into those bedding locations and try to take a shot at one. The way we look at it, it's not really worth educating that animal. We'd much rather have him feeling safe during the pre-rut when he's more likely to be moving around during daylight. And that's when we really start to capitalize on it. Why we kind of choose October 18 and October 20 as our dates that we kind of start to move in, there's a couple reasons. First has been just trail camera studies on our properties over the last 10 years. We've ran cameras since 2010. So this season right here will be our 10th season running trail cameras on 2 different properties. And one thing that we've noticed every year is that the deer that we're targeting don't typically start moving consistently during daylight until about the 20th of October. And so if that's the deer you're targeting, and if he doesn't normally start moving around until the 20th of October, and you're going in and hunting really hard before that, the chances that you're educating that deer are much higher than the chances of you actually harvesting that deer. And another reason why we don't really like to push too far into our properties until about October 18, October 20, is because of what the research has shown with buck movement throughout a hunting season. There's been quite a few studies with collared bucks, and what they do is they'll track their movement throughout the hunting season. And one thing that you'll notice if you're watching a buck's movement throughout the day in the early season is he actually does move all over the place. But what you got to be focusing on is when is he moving. What you'll see on a lot of these maps is the deer is moving all over the place at night. And once it gets to be about 6 in the morning, he kind of shoots back to his bedding location and he stays there until about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, and then that's when he starts moving all over the place again. So not only do our trail cameras kind of show us that the bucks don't really start moving until about the 18th or 20th of October on a consistent basis during daylight, the research from the collar bucks shows us the same thing. It's not really until the beginning of the pre-rut that those bucks start getting to those bedding areas a little bit later, and they start getting up from their beds in the afternoon a little bit earlier. So those are two reasons why we really don't want to push too far into our property until about the 20th of October. Now that does not mean that we don't hunt. It's deer season. We love to be in the woods. We work the entire year getting this property set up. We're going to be in the woods. But what we're doing more in the early season is we're doing what are called observation sits. So we're sitting somewhere on our property, maybe right next to a road, right next to our cabin, right next to a pole barn, somewhere we're still in the tree. We still have potential deer movement right next to us, but there's a very low chance that we're gonna see the deer that we're after, but there's also a very low chance that we're gonna be educating any deer on our property. And from these stands, sometimes we have a little bit of a window to see, are the deer moving back and forth? Where are they going? Where are they coming from? How are they relating to some of the improvements that we put in? And that's to try to gather as much information as we can to try to help us out later in the season. And I know this is not a very exciting approach to deer hunting. A lot of times, October 1st hits or maybe that first Friday of the season, you want to go back and you want to sit your favorite stand. I've done it, but I'm telling you, in my experience, the risk of going to that location is much greater than the chances of you actually harvesting that buck that you're after. And to give you guys an example of a success story with this, it actually comes from last season. So last year we actually didn't push into one of our properties until the first week of November. And I don't think it was the actual first sit. I think we sat in the morning. We saw a fair number of bucks, but we didn't get any opportunities. But that night of the first day that we actually went in and hunted that property, we were able to harvest the oldest deer that was on our property last year. And again, I know it's not very exciting and it's hard to take that first leap of faith, but if you're able to do it, I would highly recommend giving it a try. Those deer are going to feel so comfortable moving on your property that during the pre-rut and the rut, your chances of taking your target buck increase a ton. So guys, again, I know we didn't cover everything there was about early season hunting, but hopefully this helps some of you. If you guys have any other early season strategies or have any questions, I'd love to hear about them. Please drop your comments in the comment section below. I'll get back to those as soon as I can, and we will see you guys in the next video.